That is, when they become guiding or regulative beliefs without metaphysics. And here I owe a debt to Richard Braithwaite in his influential article, An Empiricist View of Religious Belief, and also a comment by Ludwig Wittgenstein in his Lectures and Conversations. So I owe a debt of gratitude to these two scholars for the line of thinking expressed in premise 2. Premise 3. As a corollary, Buddhist views like the safe bet argument in Kalama Sutta cover belief in karma and rebirth without metaphysics in a pragmatic way against the modernist claims that karma and rebirth can be removed in Buddhism. So how to understand this? Let's stop and think for a minute. The modernists, like Stephen Batchelor, say we can simply ignore or leave out karma and rebirth. I don't think so. In my mediating view, I say that karma and rebirth views are covered in a practical way by the safe bet argument of Kalama Sutta. Premise 4. The Eightfold Noble Path consists of right view, right intention, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Premise 5. Morality, concentration, and wisdom constitute a summary of the Eightfold Path according to traditionalists, and it is a safe bet then that following them is more beneficial than not, I suppose. Premise 6, every day in this very life, people experience karma and rebirth in rising and falling, death and rebirth, because persons are impermanent processes and constantly change subject to the principle of karma. I owe this point to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. 7, as a corollary, Buddhism does not have to give up traditional ethics of morality, concentration, and wisdom in replying to the modernist criticism of karma and rebirth. So, in my view, Steve Batchelor's assertion that karma and rebirth are antique Buddhist views is simply incorrect. Therefore, the safe bet argument in Kalama Sutta protects karma and rebirth from some modernist criticisms and allows one to retain traditional ethics by premise 3 and 6. The view has a meaning. Okay, let me go up. Because there is a language game and form of life called secular Buddhism, in which meditation practices and social engagement coexist, helping meditators in local and global communities. The view has an epistemological basis because those who practice both traditional Buddhist meditation and socially engaged Buddhism will know and see the dual strands of benefits intertwining with others. These practitioners will see that in bringing together traditional Buddhist and modernist Buddhist practices, there are pragmatic outcomes far in excess of developing either of them in isolation. In other words, my belief is that we are better together. The modernists and the traditionalists are better as Buddhists together. If what our interest is the survival of Buddhism in the 21st century, we need to figure out some ways. These practitioners are not cut off from tradition. They learn and grow both from famous old masters in robes and from popular contemporary Buddhist speakers. It is a process philosopher's way of being Buddhist, re-enchantment without supernaturalism. I refer to some process thinkers who are sympathetic to Buddhism. They use meditation, engagement with societal issues related to the psychological issues of different people, social issues related to Sangha and laity interaction, and all learn more from Buddhist social life while retaining the Dhamma, such as Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. A contemporary example of this is Dr. Hansa's monastery and eco-village at Sisaket, currently being written up in a dissertation by one of our students at IBFC. Now ask, about this mediating view, what does it mean? How do you know? And how does it work? First, it has a clear meaning in a language game and form of life, of going to meditation meetings, studying Buddhist writings, helping newcomers find the way, and chanting together. Second, the view has an epistemology, because those who practice meditation will know and see the results for themselves and be assisted with their questions by monks and laypersons together who are in the community of practitioners. And by the way, footnote, my own experience is that this is what has been happening in the Philadelphia Buddhist Art Association for a couple of decades now. Monks and nuns are welcome. All kinds of lay people are welcome, and they cooperate. Thirdly, this mediating view combines the benefits of both monastic and householder life. There are many benefits possible from meditation in terms of developing the four Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, and reducing irritability, also Kodana. This view has a pragmatic outcome in terms of wellness and satisfactions that generations of meditators report, not by developing abhinya, the 6 items of higher knowledge, the psychic powers, but by developing satipatthana, or as it's called in Chinese, chit wang. This could be developing the kaya, vedana, chitta, and dharma as 4 initial keys to everything in Buddha's Buddhadasa's anapanasati system, mindfulness of breathing. So if people in the interest of focusing on the unity of Buddhism read, if they read this book by Buddhadasa, Mindfulness with Breathing, they will see how this can be done. Summary and conclusion. Okay, here we go. Summary and conclusion. Traditionalists assert that naturalized karma view and individualism are conceptually unconnected with related concepts that would ground key terms in traditional Buddhism. Modernists deny what traditionalists assert and instead say naturalized karma view and individualism are capable of being connected with other ethical concepts in Buddhism to form coherent without metaphysics. The third or middle position, which I consider to be skillful, is to say that traditional meditation practices with sila of the Eightfold Path can combine with old and new forms of meditation. The 3 traditions, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, can coexist and be practiced, I would say, in the same room, but with their individual practices, can coexist in a socially engaged way. In this way, Nibbana in this very life is the focus of meditative practice, and socially engaged Buddhism is one form that mental cultivation or bhavana can take. as, for example, Thich Nhat Hanh showed. Anything to do with nibbana after death and samadhi states would still be a viable, useful practice for those thus dedicated to Boran Kamathana of esoteric Theravada. However, in modernity, for people of the fourfold Sangha, monks, nuns, laymen, women, laymen, the problem is for us to achieve greater unity. As I interpret Buddhaghosa, sorry, this is a mistake. As I interpret Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, and Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness, are both important. Just as philosophy and Buddhism can be practiced at different moments in a whole human life, different Buddhist traditions can coexist too. So here's my epilogue. I try to situate this paper in the development of philosophy. In the mid to 20th century philosophy of religion, there was a pivot toward Wittgenstein. And this development is not dead yet, as Peter Harrison's Gifford Lecture of 2022 shows. This is a very distinguished and contemporary set of lectures. And Harrison wrote a lecture called Wittgenstein on Religious Belief, April 2nd, 2022. Now, the worlds of science and humanities are both taking a process turn, as documented in note 13. Before, philosophy had an epistemological term with early modern philosophy, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, and its linguistic turn with developments in philosophy of language, such as Wittgenstein, ordinary language philosophy, like Gilbert Ryle, and linguistic philosophy, A.J. Ayer, and others, alongside the pragmatic turn of William James, Varieties of Religious Experience, Charles Sanders Peirce, and others. Perhaps now we can say there is a process turn which includes Buddhism. Alfred North Whitehead, John B. Cobb, David Ray Griffin, and C. Robert Nestle, all in my bibliography, have shown the way to process philosophy and theology. It is a way distinct from the substance and dualistic thinking of the past, such as Plato and Descartes. Some of these process thinkers, especially John Cobb, have shown a special affinity with Buddhist thinking. One in this group really deepened William James's engagement with Buddhism. David Ray Griffin wrote a book called Reenchantment Without Supernaturalism, exploring how, in his view, Christianity is possible in modernity without mind-body dualism and without clinging to ghostly supernatural views of the afterlife. Don Kupit had previously paved the way in a series of BBC radio talks that went viral, and in the following book called A Sea of Faith, and numerous publications with his idea of a perspective with Buddhist form and Christian content. Now, in my view, he goes a little bit too far towards syncretism. I would prefer to be sure we retain the distinctiveness of the Buddhist outlook. I hope the next generation of Buddhist philosophers will develop interreligious philosophy of religion in a process way toward global coexistence of major world faiths without syncretism. This development may link with contemporary movements of ecological awareness and breaking down unilateral binary thinking that pervades modern society in many ways. Man against nature, nature against man, man against God, man against Buddha. It's very funny stuff indeed. See, the binary thinking is causing the world to move toward catastrophe. We need unitary thinking. Man with and in and through nature. And not only man, but humankind. Process philosophy is embedded in Buddhist doctrines of impermanence, non-substantiality. In my view, this does not mean we have to embrace the particular beliefs of others or mush everything up together, as in syncretism, but that building bridges is preferable to exploding them with dynamite. So this is the end of my presentation for today. If you have questions, I would be grateful to think with you about it. I do have a lot of notes, but it's not going to be possible to share them with you now. I would just point to the possibility that we could all be together at a future time. Perhaps we can be together in the next semester if you're interested in either of these two courses, writing and the one on psychology. Okay, what are your thoughts? Now is the time to let me have it. If you see something you really don't think is right, I prefer that you tell me because I didn't finish the paper. I can dialogue with you now and let you know my line of thinking. I don't guarantee that I will change it on hearing your question, but I am a good listener. And if I see something that I think needs reconsideration, I will certainly do so. Okay, so I'd like to give the first question to Audwin Wilkinson. Do you accept or not? Do you have a question? Shall I come back to you? Munjin has something. And after that, I'd like to ask.
Yes, Prof. Prof, I like this new view. I would say it's a new view because the one that I read from your book, Rationality and Buddhist Mind, I quoted something in the past paper about the Kamma and Rebirth. So do you think it's possible if I bring this up for clarification from you? Because I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure now what you mean in that book, in that paragraph now, the one that you quoted. Okay. Because the language is the way you define the sentence. I'm a little bit now doubtful.
Sorry,
that I understand the sentence. Because I think my understanding of the English is not so good.
Transcendence?
Not transcendence, but the way you explain your view on rebirth. And karma. And since we are on the same topic today, and I think this is your I would say that is your current view. Yeah.
I'll respond to this now, and you can think, and if necessary, I would like to have an email follow-up. So you expressed in the last chapter on the deathless is really where what I thought about rebirth at this time was expressed. And basically, it is that amata, translated as deathless, in the sutta I mentioned, is interpreted. That part is still unchanged in my thinking. There have been people who interpreted deathless to mean a permanent blissful center of consciousness. I take it that is refuted by the Buddha himself in Sutta. And that is characteristic, permanent blissful center of consciousness view of Atma, is characteristic of the Chandogya Upanishad of Hinduism. So basically, using this word, the deathless, applied to Buddhism needs special care. And I think I have given it special care by noticing that it can be reinterpreted in the 20th century, which was when I wrote this, by linking it to the idea expressed by Stuart Sutherland and Dowie Phillips that, for example, in Phillips' book, Death and Immortality, there is a recognition of the possibility of having immortality without metaphysics. That is a new concept coming up in the late 20th century philosophy of religion. In other words, they too do not believe that there is a soul substance anymore. So that's one strand of the treatment of amata. And at the same time, there's a question about mind-body dualism, which I do not think was in early Buddhism, but some people looking at similar material do think there was mind-body dualism. I think this is a great danger. For example, in the work of René Descartes, we have found Descartes believes that animals have no minds, and so they are complex machines. And so humans can deal with them any way they want. Kill, destroy, torture. It doesn't matter because they have no minds and no feelings. I don't believe that that's true of animals, nor do I think it's necessitated by Buddhist theory. And this is connected with a book review I did of Paul Griffith's book, which I guess alongside Rationality in Mind in Early Buddhism, that's been one of my most cited publications up till now. The book review shows how Griffith's thinking, starting with the Sanskritic texts that he knew and thinking back to early Buddhism, presupposed that because mind-body dualism was in Sanskritic Mahayana and in the text that he studied, it must be there in early Buddhism. And my review showed, even to his satisfaction, that Paul Griffiths had not demonstrated that. We had a correspondence about it. And he said, well, what's your view? And I said, on this question, I don't have to take a view. I have only to demonstrate that you didn't prove your point in your book. So there is a lot that's controversial concerning the last chapter. I'm not sure which point you are interested in hearing me talk about. So I have talked about what I think is most important concerning amata. It is deathless, but that doesn't mean that Tathagata has invisible feet, that after death, the Tathagata is still a person in some sense. Okay, enough said by me. What is your focus, your area of interest? Touch on it or not? Or what?
Prof, you want me to answer you, or you want the rest of them to try to answer?
I want to know what the main issue is you want more clarity about. I'm not sure I got it. And that
I see.
I talked about several things.
Okay, it's actually not amata. It was a chapter earlier before the amata, the deathless.
Chapter 6 is the deathless.
It's chapter 5. It's about Kamma and Rebirth. And then you mentioned
you're interested in chapter 5. Okay, I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
And then you mentioned that in philosophy thoughts, rebirth cannot be proven because there is it's not logical. There's one person, then the next person will inherit the karma. You cannot prove that, in T1, T2, and T3. So the most logical, rational way is to treat it like a background in Buddhism, the teaching of rebirth.
Oh, now I know.
Yeah,
no problem.
But now we take a modernist modernist view is that it can be proven by the Satipatthana, by the method of meditations and the practicing Noble Eightfold
Sorry, that's not correct. The modernist view is number 2. The view I'm representing is number 3. It's the mediating view.
The mediating view. Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes. So now, if someone were to ask me, then how do you want to say support a philosophy? Yeah, they're right. They have a point. It's not logical. So can I say that? Okay, I think we take the mediator view that it can be
right now. That's the view I'm developing.
Yeah.
Let me recharacterize the import of chapter 5. So, let's see. Have the copy? Yeah. Of rationality in mind. Have the copy? No?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, I don't have it ready to hand, so I just do it from memory.
Yeah.
The chapter deals with
wait a minute, Prof. Just a minute. If I share the paper with you, the specific paragraph.
Yeah, that's handy. Go ahead.
Okay, just give me a minute.
Good. I don't have the book. Okay, go ahead and share the passage, but I don't have the book at hand because I didn't expect to be talking about something I wrote in 1987 today.
Okay. I can't see. I always have this problem.
Okay, shall we take another tact? Let's not worry about finding something like that. Let me respond to what I think it might be about.
Okay.
Okay, so stop the share so we go back to gallery view of everybody.
Okay.
So actually a main issue that I think you might be interested in came up in chapter 4, which is called Mind and Rebirth, and was developed through the view that I still hold about Buddhist empiricism. I published 2 articles about this in a Cambridge University Press journal, and my view hasn't changed, and it has been somewhat controversial among traditionalists. The view is that people didn't understand when they started calling Buddhism empiricism what empiricism means without understanding. And what it means in the West is 5 sense empiricism, that you get knowledge from experience only in reference to the 5 senses. It should be obvious to everybody in this room that this cannot be the Buddhist position, because according to Dhamma, experience covers 6 senses, the 5 senses plus the mind. And it is in the mind that we apprehend abhinya, the chal abhinya, the 6. Okay, so let's think about this. If the Buddha didn't believe in what some westernized interpreters thought was empiricism, if he didn't believe that, what did he believe? He believed in what's called experientialism. And that relates to one school of pre-Buddhistic philosophers. There were, as you would all know, if you read something about the historical context of the arising of Buddhism, skeptics, materialists, fatalists, Brahmin traditionalists, and a school called experientialists. We can trace this out today in the massive work of, big volume, but very useful, K.N. Jayatilaka, who published Early Buddhist Theory of Knowledge in 1963 by Allen and Unwin Press in London. And in the work of another teacher, I didn't study with Jayatilaka, I studied with his student, Kulupahana. And another teacher that I did study with, K.N. Upadhyaya, in his big book, Early Buddhism and the Bhagavad Gita. Both of these thinkers understand that Buddha was in this experientialist group of pre-Buddhistic philosophers. When he started on his journey, his insight quest, he studied with many thinkers, not only the yogic masters, Kalama and Ramaputta, but also he studied with Jains, and he punished the body so he could touch his rib cage down to a little water and a grain of rice a day. He did that, and he found that leads nowhere. That does not lead to Nibbana. So he rejected the Jains. He studied with the Brahmins, but he discovered they don't have knowledge. Neither does the first one know, nor the teacher of that one know, nor the teacher of that one know. They just always depend on their teacher, the guru, and ultimately always on the text, the Vedas. But the Vedas is not based on any sound knowledge. It asserts something that Buddhists think is false. That is, the Atman exists, and it's a permanent blissful center of consciousness. So the pre-Buddhist tradition contained many schools, and the closest one to the Buddha's knowledge that he got from experience was the tradition called experientialists. Okay, how did they know what they knew? 5 senses plus the mind. How did Buddha know what he knew? 5 senses plus the mind. Totally different from empiricism. We get knowledge from 5 senses only. Rationalists in the West have asserted the opposite. We get knowledge from reason alone. Okay, so that's coming out of the last, 4th and 5th chapters. So let's continue so that this is not just a dialogue with me and you, however valuable it may be for me and you. Let's continue by email, and I'll try to hone in on the quotation you're interested in and give you a response. Okay, so now I see Edwin Wilkinson is scratching his chinny chin chin, and that means he's thinking really hard. So I invite you, say something that will cause me to think more. And next I ask anybody, or perhaps Frau Rungvid, if he's ready.
Okay. First, just a small detail. You mentioned earlier that there's a Pali word that is translated sometimes as indefinite and other times infinite. I'm wondering what that Pali word is.
I'm wondering too, because I heard this lecture etched in my memory now about 15 years ago in a lecture by a professor from Smith University, which was a lecture in the library for a limited audience, invited small group. So I don't have access to that information, nor do I have an easy way to reconstruct it. I would just invite you to look up in the Oxford English Dictionary the meanings of infinite and the meanings of indefinite, and then compare it with what you have learned by reading Sutta. That's the best I can do on that point. Thank you. Okay, Frau Rungrit, do you have something? I'm expecting something good from you. Odin, do you have another point following on from that?
I I did, if we have time.
Yeah, sure we do. I thought that was your point.
Okay. Okay, so I think in your slides, you had 2 slides in which you showed numbered premises for arguments, argument A and argument B. And in argument A, the premise number 4, I made a note that something didn't make sense about that. I'm wondering if you have time to show that to us.
Okay, let me see. Argument A is a traditionalist, and the premise you're interested in is 4, right? Right? Argument A, premise 4, right? Let me see if I can find that now.
I think his internet is gone, Ajahn. Or he's back now. You ask him again.
Sorry?
His internet was cut off. It was paused for a few seconds. Yeah, Odwin is back now.
Okay, I'll try to get that, and if I can't, we'll do it another way. Thank you. The traditionalist and modernist. We just want the traditionalist. First argument. Yeah. Okay. Not that.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't understand number 4.
Okay. By the way, let me make another point about the distinction, which doesn't exist in Pali so far as I understand, between infinite and indefinite. That has not been included in this paper for the obvious reason that I don't have the documentation to prove it. And that point, so far as I can see, is tangential to all the arguments I have created, either the ones that I disagree with or the one that I agree with. So I think that's a non-starter so far as this paper is concerned. Okay.
Okay.
So let me go through again.
I'm looking
Premise
at
1. I see that. Yeah. Okay. Premise 1 says there are these 2 filters with which Buddhism is viewed: secularism and individualism. And then premise 4 talks about individualism. Okay. Your comment again?
Okay, as I read it now it makes sense. I don't know why I didn't understand it the first time. So we can skip that one. Now it's clear.
Okay.
But in argument B, it looked...
Okay, I go down.
In argument B, it looked like the...
Okay, we're there now.
Yes, there it looks like the premises number 2 and 3 contradict each other.
Okay, so 2 says, noticing the historical development of Buddhism, there is no original form of early Buddhism that remains totally unchanged. And then 3 states the same point in a different way, but uses the word core. Whether there is any unchanged original core of Buddhist doctrine is undetermined. So let's say I do, as I have had occasion to do a lot of times, an introductory lecture on Buddhism for a public humanities forum. I might list a number of things that for us are well known, like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the three signs of existence, and so on, these common schemas that you can get as a basis for starting a lecture. Okay. As you know, that now that you are becoming scholars, there are worlds within worlds in studying Buddhism. You saw the world of a real traditional text-oriented Pali scholar when you heard 2 lectures by Professor Huang from Dongguk. In that world, some questions really matter pertaining to Pali words and their meanings. Then there is another world that has to do with the engagement of Buddhism with other religions, where it is studied at a loftier level of generality, not at the level of Pali text study, but at the level of religious dialogue. So studying Buddhism is a little like looking at an M.C. Escher print. If you do that sometime, you'll notice that in the print, there are staircases, for example, that interlock, and you can even get lost in thinking, how would you move about in this imagined space? So there are worlds within worlds. There's the world of the Sunday school Dhamma teacher, which sometimes ends up reducing Buddhism to a few simplicities so that children can learn. There's the world of the undergraduate lecturer who has to cover a lot of different things. And for that person, Buddhism is one item in one unit on world religions. There's the world of the research scholar, where we start caring more about words and their meanings. Then there's the level of philosophy of religion to include Buddhism. See, each of these areas have subtly different and sometimes obviously different concerns. I see that to share with you that one reason why Richard Gombrich, in the beginning of How Buddhism Began, is so very modest. He says, you know, the more I study Buddhism, the less I know. And that is because of the complexity of how it's studied, not a matter of his knowledge of Pali. You can know all about Pali you want to know. You may still be stumped by some questions of interpretation of text, because not everything can be decided by interpretation of words. We have to make sure that we understand the sentences, the meanings, and how they coexist to make a network of Dhamma. So at the level I'm speaking to you today, it will be the level I speak to people in a room who are all philosophers in some way. But some of them may have nothing to do with religion at all. Others may be versed in Pali. So when you speak to a general audience, you need to craft your way of thinking skillfully to meet that audience. And so for this presentation, it's not about polytextual exegesis. I've done that in my life in several ways and continue occasionally to do that. But it's not the only way to study Buddhism. So I would care more about whether a student in this class can grasp the general outlines of what I'm doing today. That means starting from a disputable question, presenting both sides of it, and then taking your own point of view. If you can do that going out of this talk, I'd be very proud of you. And I'm already proud of a couple of you who've been able to do this in your academic papers. Okay, that's my interest. Okay, so with that said, Mr. Wilkinson, do you have a follow-up about argument B?
I think I see the difference in premise number 2. It says no original form and an original core, and the difference between form and core is
yes. When I wrote
the part that escaped me. It escaped me the first time.
You hit the nail on the head. When I wrote premise 3, I was thinking about a particular professor of Buddhism who used that term and objected to me while I was still learning about 30 years ago. I know a little more now, but like Gombrich, I'm sure I don't know it all. What would that even mean? There are always worlds within worlds. However, I don't think these two sentences mean the same thing. When we speak about an original core, we would have to be really ready to document that. I think it's pretty hard because we only have the Theravada recension. We do not have the Sautrantika and the other recensions of the words that were scribally written down and recited by Bhanakas in different communities. So we have to be modest. We don't really know the exact words of the Buddha. We have the earliest material we can find. And for practitioners in the 21st century, so long after the Buddha passed, I think that's quite enough. It's certainly enough for me. I'm happy to read the Pali texts. And I'm happy to think about how some of the meanings overlap into Mahayana. And how, as a future community of very probably in America at least, the Fourfold Sangha might take 100 years. But eventually, the meaning of Sangha will change in America, at least. And you saw in one article I produced on the screen that people are already moving in that way in their thought. So, you know, the Episcopal Church and the Catholic Church split. And more recently, there was a big tiff about gay ordination. So they have a hard time keeping it together. I don't want us to follow that. I hope to work with my best students, the best minds I can find, toward both socially engaged Buddhism, ecologically engaged Buddhism, and a Buddhism that is recognizably as such wherever you go in the world, that we will be welcomed as brothers and sisters. That would be a future, somewhat utopian maybe, but that's what I'm hoping for. But my utopia is very different from Stephen Batchelor's. In the last pages of Best Buddhist Writing, Batchelor envisions a new age. Last thing I want to imagine, because if you go into any bookstore and you see the kind of stuff that's published under the heading New Age literature, it hardly deserves the term literature for the most part. You can be your own judge. I have my view. You can take your view. The New Age. It is a new age of syncretism, people imagine, where all the religions meld together and everybody dances around the fire, kumbaya. Remember John Lennon's...
Except nobody would follow that.
Oh, what is it to start with? Yeah, a mush.
Yeah, when I read the Sutta Pitaka, I don't really see anywhere where the Sangha tells the lay people that you have to believe this or you have to believe that or you can't be a Buddhist lay follower.
Well, you know, just like in the Roman Church, there's tradition and there's scripture. And I think we could ask Frau Rundgren what he thinks about your question. Let's have a little crosstalk. Can you deal with this one? You're in robes and I'm not. So.
Professor, I didn't catch the question. Can you ask me again? Because I was listening and then I didn't catch everything.
So in the Sutta Pitaka, I don't remember any time that a monk or the Buddha said, you have to believe this, you have to believe that, or you can't be a Buddhist layperson. Do you know of any example? Yeah.
Actually, that is true. In Buddhism, we don't actually force our followers to believe in something. But, you know, if you come into practice, especially in Thailand, we would say sattha always comes first. So belief is actually quite important. When we're saying belief or believing something, it doesn't mean you have to like giving it all to believe, but it's something you have to, you know, it's not believing and then just leave it, but believing, not believing, but you have to like practice and see for yourself. You know, like in Buddhism we say pachatang, so you should be able to you know, open up your mind and then try practicing what being taught to you and see for yourself. For example, in the concept of karma or rebirth or something like this, you wouldn't be able to understand it or see it clearly unless you reaching a pinya or having some kind of magical insight. And most people never reach there, but at least you should be able to put yourself into the group of practitioner and then practice, meditate, and see how this meditation can bring you to the certain level. Or maybe you wouldn't be able, eventually you wouldn't be able to reach that point where you can see your past life or you can see your self being rebirth from some kind of past life, but at least you will see the effect of meditation does to you. And perhaps at that level, you can actually believing more and more of what the Buddha said, because this is true, this is not true, and it's happening according to what the Buddha said. Then you have more sattha or have more faith in Buddhism, then maybe you can come to believe even if you don't see that for yourself.
Yes, that's a very important point. There is a group of monks called Those Freed by Faith. Very interesting. I want to add one more little thing in reply to Audwin, and that's that in Majjhima Nikaya 38, which I just quickly looked up on my phone, Mahatansaka Sutta, there is a discussion where we learn from the Buddha directly what is not Dhamma. So we do not have to think if the Sangha does not tell lay people directly how to believe. There is no guidance. There is guidance and insight from the Buddha in the Sutta Pitaka. I give you one very clear example where he rebukes a person. Sati, the fisherman's son, is brought by the monks to talk to Buddha because they hear him talking trash. So they bring Sati, the fisherman's son, to the Buddha. And so Sati now has to, he's on the red carpet, as we would say in American, right? Here he is in the spotlight before the master. He has to answer the accusation that all the monks are making that, hey man, you don't know what you're talking about. So Buddha says, well, what is it that you believe, Sati? And Sati says, insofar as I understand Dhamma, Vijnana is the permanent Atman. I paraphrase. And the Buddha gets really excited in one of the rare places where he gets to the verge of anger, because he says, Sati, haven't I told you in many a figure, in many a illustration, that consciousness depends on condition, that vijnana depends on conditions, and without conditions, there is no consciousness. So he had previously taught the Dhamma that there are conditions for consciousness. So Sati says, oh, wow, yeah, I guess I messed up. So he gets corrected, he goes off, he knows Dhamma and not Dhamma. So we get instruction from the Buddha. That's why the subtitle of the MCU, Common Buddhist Text, is Guidance and Insight from the Buddha. To me, that's worth more than anything I could learn except my own experience. Thank you all for your comments. Yeah, I appreciate it. Anything else to say, or anybody else got a comment? And thank you for our Rungrit for bringing up the limit of what Sangha would say. They're not accustomed to abuse people. They don't say, oh, you got it wrong. They don't usually do that. Every time I got a chance, which was rare, to talk to a great monk, and I put a problematical question to him that I was having, one of the disputable questions, he refused to take sides.
Professor, I wanted to ask about belief in karma and rebirth back in the Western world, like in America.
Okay.
When we talking about rebirth over there, do they believe in rebirth like Orthodox Buddhism believe like you come from past life and your mind carry on to the next life, something like that, or you believe like the modern monks say, Buddha say that being rebirth is like your mind being formed again, like your new jitta form again, and then you don't have to care about the previous rebirth or your past life at all. I think in the modern world, the concept that is more popular these days is the concept of Buddha Dasa, you know?
Yes,
because
that's
you can no longer prove you're coming back from the past life and having the next life to be looking forward to. But the concept of being rebirth, like happiness and dukkha, happiness, dukkha, where your jitta and being born and die, something like that is more popular these days. So
yes, you're wondering, but I think there is no consensus in America on this question. No one way that Buddhists speak. That's the answer, really. There isn't a consensus. There are many people following Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa in the States, but there are still many people who hold a traditionalist view. When I taught at the Sangha meetings, we call it Sangha, not in your sense here, but when I taught at Sangha meetings as an invited speaker, I always taught Pali Buddha Suttas every week. And the next week, there would be a Mahayana teacher. And I would first present what I thought would be the Buddhist position from the text. And then I problematized that. And I said to them, well, how would you interpret this in your everyday life? And that's where the real discussions came out, because they already knew the doctrine of previous lives and all of these things that I was opening up with reference to an individual point, right? But they already knew that. They had read Sutta Pitaka. But the issue is, how do we interpret it? And to American Buddhists, I think Buddha Dasa's interpretation very valuable, but I don't think there's any orthodoxy about it. It's not that now, instead of the suttas, we only read Buddha Dasa. It's not happening. The Americans still read primary texts. And then from there, they go on, and here's the difficult thing. Without much of a presence of a monastic Sangha, I think it's possible that some American Buddhists may stray from the Dhamma, just because there's no way for people to be sure in any psychological sense of certainty. So there's logical certainty, there's psychological certainty. There's no way for a person to be psychologically certain that their interpretation of Sutta Pitaka is correct if they don't have access to either very high-level monks or expert Dhamma teachers in Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, Korean. And we don't have that access in many Sanghas in America. It's very decentralized. I mean, even to take one city, Philadelphia, when I last counted, there were about 50 of them. About that many. And some dedicated to special parts of Buddhism, some dedicated to Pure Land, some dedicated to Zen. It was rare to find one like Philadelphia Buddhist Society Association, which included all. And that's the beauty of what they're trying to do, make a place for sitting where any Buddhist from any tradition can come and take part. And afterwards, chat and learn, look in the library, and learn from each other, and not be too close-minded. So maybe the best thing about American Buddhist Dhamma situation is that people are willing to listen to each other. People are willing to learn. And so I think that's my great hope for the future, that this will not be extinguished, but that we will still have enough good monks coming from Asia to give us the occasional lecture and help do the kind of thing the Buddha did with sati. It's this absolute, complete folly, he said, haven't I? And so on and so on. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Okay, and now it's time for the monk lunch. I see people not directly, but kind of wondering, is it time for lunch? I think that's correct. We have maybe 5 minutes remaining for any other observations. You know, I struggled with the concept of the last day because for me, Buddhism is an ongoing thing. There is never any last day, never a last day of a class, but one class elides into the next class. So I had a hard time formulating what to do about this class. And finally, I decided, well, all semester I've been trying to get people to pay attention to disputable questions. Now is the time for me to share how I personally have done that this semester, here and now. So that's why I want to share with you my latest idea for research. It's in need of fine-tuning. I thank you for your comments, and I will produce the final copy and send it on Monday, as I hope everybody committed to reading a paper at Parsed will do, and I'm delighted that there will be people attending to learn about this process. And I understand a little hesitancy among the venerables because you are representing Buddhism in an important way when you speak to philosophers. But I would encourage you to go forth and preach and teach and interpret Dhamma for the philosophers. Tenzin Dorje is brave enough to do that this year. So I want everybody to feel, if they're in robes or not, they can speak to philosophers and know philosophers will respect them. So, okay. Have a wonderful life going out to the world. Hope you're all safe from the new wave of COVID. I see many monks and lay people without masks even now. I'm so sorry for them. This super spreader is scheduled to cause us a lot of suffering. Please use your alcohol on your body. Please use your mask. Please observe the social distance for your own survival. It will be tough after about 3 weeks here in Thailand. I got the report from China today that one scholar said only Shanghai is safe. Okay, that's all. Be well.
Thank you.